and this faith journey has produced is peace and joy. And so, God, we enter your gates today with thanksgiving. We are thanking you that we are growing up in faith. We are thanking you that we are becoming and beholding and becoming change for the time we have spent in your presence.
Hello. Good afternoon, beautiful people. How are y'all doing today? Hello. It is, as always, both a privilege and a pleasure to be with you today. And I am so happy you are here with me. My name is Leonore Reynolds Jones, and I have the awesome privilege of being the proprietress of a wonderful kingdom enterprise called Legacy Builders, where I help individuals and couples gain necessary tools and skills to not only leave a lasting legacy, but also have transcendent wealth. Now, if you were with me yesterday, you would have been a part of my big announcement, right? My big announcement where I told everyone that I'm doing something big, something new, something different, something in obedience. And that big thing, what is it, you ask? That big thing is my women's gathering. It is called My Girlfriend's Kitchen, the Global Gathering. And that is right. I am inviting women from all walks of life, from all places on earth, however you are connected to me or to my ministry or even to our speakers, right? Because who knows that yesterday, that's right, yesterday, I went ahead and what I did was I shared the big graphic about it, and I started telling you about it, and I gave you some information, and I told you go to the website because all the website is there and all the information is on the website. And thank you to all of you who did, right? Because yes, I saw that you did and you were obedient. Thank you to all of you who commented on the post. Now, some of you are like, is it you by yourself? Well, I am so glad you asked. It is not me by myself. And if you were reading all the way through, you would see that we were playing the Guess Who game, where I gave one of our topics. And for the next couple of weeks leading up to the conference, every other week, I will give you a topic, and I'll give it to you on Tuesday. And then on this broadcast on Wednesdays, I will announce my winner of the person who guessed the speaker, right? And you will get your prize, of course. I was saying at the conference, but I think I am going to send prizes. So if you have a guess, you have until the end of this broadcast, which will be around 12:30, 12:45. Go type your answer. Find my post from yesterday. It's a bright pink flyer and it says My Girlfriend's Kitchen, the Global Gathering, right? And on that, you can guess. Our keyword is grief. So our first speaker that I have the pleasure of introducing to you will speak on the topic of grief. And so you answer me, and yes, I'm changing up the game, but I thought it would be some people who wants to wait until December to get their prize. Now you're going to get something special when you attend this conference, but who wants to wait until December to receive your prize? So I wanted to, expedite that process. So I am saying, if you are a winner, if you correctly guess, tell me your guess. I will contact you through the social media that you responded on, and I will collect your information so that I can share your prize. Right. So right now we don't have a winner. So it's open, it's available. Whoever comments, whoever guesses, they get the prize. And so I'm not going to give it away. Your keyword is grief. right? So that's enough about that. Let's switch gears and do a little bit. And I haven't done this in a while, but I just feel I am asking you to guys, please share. So they tell you that if you like what is happening, if you enjoy this content, if you find it meaningful, if God has ever spoken to you, if you have received encouragement in any way, I am asking you to kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're going to continue to consume it. But definitely follow, like, and this is the most important one, share. Good stuff isn't supposed to be kept to ourselves. If you found a bomb restaurant, you would tell all your friends about how awesome the food was. Nobody would have to, like, you would tell them, oh, they're like, oh, I'm trying to go find something to do. And you were like, man, I had the greatest experience at so-and-so. And so it would be my absolute honor that you felt that way about this broadcast, and that you would share this broadcast and share about the gathering that is coming up. Tell your friends. Like, there's this lady, I've caught her a couple of times on Facebook, and she's always speaking good, but she's doing something different. She has this thing coming up at the end of the year, and I just want you maybe consider sharing. That is what my ask. So you can subscribe, you can follow, you can like, you can share. Okay, that is that, and I'm gonna put that away, and you get my name back. Now, on to today's topic. If you have been tracking with me, right? And I say if you have been tracking with me, you know that we have been talking about. Let me see. What's the best way? Ooh, it's doing its thing. Okay, sorry. But if you've been tracking with me, you know we've been talking about how to please God, right? How to please God. And we are like, yes. Yeah. And so what we are doing, though, is we've been talking about how to please God. And that looks like, it started, let's go back all the way to the beginning. It started with, we had a in-depth multi-week conversation about pride. At the end of the conversation, and the conversation was between us and the Father, right? Where he was giving us downloads and information about pride. At the end of it all, we arrived at the conclusion that pride was simply counterfeit faith, right? Because faith is confidence, and it's counterfeit because faith needs to be stored. And so when you store your faith in the wrong place, it's a poor imitation of what the real thing is. And so pride is storing your faith. And we talked about, you can store it in people, we can store it in things, and we can store it in the enemy, right? And we showed how those things were a poor knockoff, were a counterfeit of what faith in God could actually do, and the return we would receive for our faith in God. That was pride. But in our discourse, we realized that if pride is counterfeit faith, and there is no place in the Bible where God talks about pride in a positive context, then we couldn't then take like the verse where it says, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Note that the word there was not God was proud of Jesus, he was pleased with Jesus. So we then said, if we can't make God proud, we can, however, make him pleased. And so we are in this journey of how do we please God, right? That's the quickest backup. And we started with the how you please God. The first step is to recognize who God is. Like, you can't please somebody you don't know. Strangers don't care about your pleasure, nor do you care about theirs. So you have to recognize and know who God is. And you had to know God in some very strategic ways. You had to know him as Lord. You had to know him as Savior and as sovereign, right? Lord, Savior, sovereign, as in ruler. Those three mattered because we had to understand, recognize that God made everything, and every word, as sovereign, every word he says is law, right? And you have to recognize that. And so in recognizing that and who God is, that then you have to then submit to him as Lord, right? Because once you recognize, like, okay, this is who God is, you still have the choice to submit to the things he says. If every word God says is law, then you have to choose to obey the law. Obeying the law looks like submitting to him as Lord. Like, God, I see you as this, and so I'm going to submit to you as Lord and prioritize your words over my feelings, over my choices, over everything. I'm going to prioritize you. The Bible calls it fearing the Lord, okay? And just a bonus, it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So you're wondering why isn't things working out? Because you have not submitted to God as Lord. And then number 3, you have not surrendered to his authority. I'm just telling y'all, like, this is what we have covered over the last weeks. And so we talked about, what does surrendering to his authority looks like? It looks like obedience. Surrendering to God's authority looks like obedience. It looks like doing what God told you, period. And doing it when he told you. And going to him to get the details so you can operate in what? Excellence, right? And so we are, with all of that now, you're like, okay, sis, I've been tracking with you. So what is today? Alignment with his will. And I am going to give you a twofer, because I am going to give you 2 for 1. So alignment with his will and operate in obedience. Because those last 2, they absolutely go together. So how do you please God? You please God by recognizing who he is. You submit to him as Lord. You surrender to his authority. And when you are in alignment with his will, you will operate in obedience. Now you're like, okay, sis, I need you to say more on obedience. Well, I am so happy you asked. It would be my pleasure to say a little more on obedience. I am reading the book. Well, I am concluding the book. I literally only have, I think today is Wednesday, so I have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I have 3 more days in the book. The Awe of God by John Bevere. And he did something so beautiful in that book. He gave, I think it's 5 points about obedience. And I am going to share those with you. Again, hear me clearly that these 5 points, some of them I knew but didn't have language for, and others he just made so clear. So here's your encouragement. If you don't already have the book, The Awe of God by John Bevere, go ahead, scoop your copy, take that journey. It will absolutely bless you. But I am going to share a little bit that I learned from that book. One of the things was something I already did. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, so how do we align with his will through operating in obedience? The first one is you obey immediately. And you, that's not even like a big mic drop for y'all, because we've seen the post where it says delayed obedience is disobedience. We've seen, I saw a post, I'm pretty sure it was last week, by Brother Flowers, where he talked about procrastination is simply slow disobedience or delaying the will of God. You know, if God said, do X, Y, Z, what are you waiting for? You heard what you heard. And again, we're speaking from the thing that you already recognize who God is. You already submit to him as Lord, and you have already surrendered to his authority. So it's not no question of, oh, did I hear what I heard? Maybe God did. No. We have already solved those things because you have already resolved in your heart that I want to live a life that is pleasing to God. And so you're like, I'm going to do that. And so God says, sis, I want you to quit your job and start a business. And you're like, nah, that's not what God said. No, that is what he said. And so obey immediately. Then, and so I'm actually going to give you all 5. So if you are taking notes, this is where you take your notes about the obedience rules, is what I'm going to call them. John Bevere's obedience rules that to get more information, you have to read the book, The Awe of God. He gives you all the scripture. He takes you over a couple of days and he explains each one. So you obey immediately. You obey even if it's difficult. You obey at cost to yourself. You obey even if it's painful. And finally, you obey until it's done. Again, obey immediately. Obey even if it hurts, even if it costs, even if it's painful. Obey at cost to yourself. Obey until it's done, and obey even if it doesn't make sense. It hurts, it don't make sense, until it's done, even if it hurts. And what was the other one? Even if it's painful. I'm telling y'all, this is gonna free you. This is how. And so I'm gonna, and so let's go through the. How can I get the book? The book is on my phone and I'm live on Instagram, y'all, and I can't get it. Okay, but I'm gonna do my best. So I already told you, obey immediately is like, what are you waiting for? It's different if you're like God said, and you're unsure, but if you've gone through the first 3 steps, you're not unsure. You heard God correctly. And so to the obey immediately, at the end of this, I'm going to tell y'all a story to tie it all together. Because again, we're talking about being in the will of God, alignment with his will, and operating in obedience. And so as we talk, guys, I don't know what I did, but I cannot see my comments on Facebook. I know y'all are commenting. I see it, and I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to sit here and figure it out today, but I don't know what is happening because I can no longer see my comments on Facebook, and it is driving me bananas. Anyway, so while I try and fix that, let's keep talking. It's redirecting me, ladies and gentlemen. It's not letting me get to Facebook, so I can't fix it right at the present moment. But so I said, in the obey immediately part, there is I would call it a grace when you obey immediately, because God empowers you and he allows you to do what you couldn't do yourself. And so God told you, go back to school. Obey immediately looks like you go, and what degree, and to be clear, right, I want to deposit to you that quite frequently the thing, sometimes it's not a far off, because sometimes when God finally speaks, you've been wrestling against a feeling for a while. So you've been feeling dissatisfied with your job. You've been praying about a new job. You don't like this isn't working. And so God finally is like, look, I want you to go back to school. And you're like, what? That looks like you go and you get a degree. And I am saying, though, it's different. I want you to know, though, when I'm saying obey immediately, that doesn't mean you can't ask questions. So let's say that immediate obedience doesn't mean you can't ask questions. You can ask a clarifying question so that you can move forward. But the same, like, I'm going to tell y'all a story at the end. The same day you get that thing, you ask your questions then, but your questions are in tune of just so I can be obedient. So if God is like, go back to school and you don't know, then your follow-up question so that you can walk out your obedience is, okay, for what? Or do you have a particular school in mind? Or if he said, go back to school, quiet your spirit and ask God, do you have some more direction for me? Because when I tell you my story at the end, it's going to be like hair raising to you. But the reality is God will give you all the details so that you can obey. Let's think about Abraham. God gave him this son, and this thing was, okay, I want you to go sacrifice Isaac, and I want you to go to this mountain over here at Moriah. That's where I want to sacrifice. God gave him enough information to move forward. The problem is, how many of you are still stuck at the beginning because from the time God said something you didn't want to hear, you stopped listening? So it wasn't that God didn't give you enough information. You just stopped listening. He said, go back to school. And because your mind is set against going back to school, you're like, I ain't going back to nobody's school. So when God is telling you, oh, go back to school to do this, and this, you stop listening. It wasn't that the information was incomplete. It was that you stopped listening. If I'm talking to you right now, I encourage you to repent. Go back and tell God you're sorry. And see, this is why we spent so much time on pride, right? Because you got to humble yourself before God. But God, I am sorry. I was raggedy when you told me to go back to school. And because it wasn't what I wanted to do, I didn't listen. So now I'm back. I'm submitting myself to you, surrendering myself. I'm repenting from my disobedience, and I am prepared to listen now. Can you please tell me what you were saying when you told me to go back to school? Obey immediately. Then obey even if it hurts. I think that one is self-explanatory. Like the idea, and we're going to stick with Isaac, like Abraham had waited his entire life for Isaac. And then God, 13 years of basking in the beauty of a son of his body, of his miracle, 13 years of walking in this miracle, talking to his, Anthony Brown has I'm a living, breathing, walking, talking, moving miracle. That was Isaac for Abraham. And 13 years in, and God is like, now I need you to sacrifice that joint. And the Bible says immediately, the next morning, Abraham jumps up like, all right, let's go. I'm going to grab Isaac. I'm going to grab some wood. I'm going to get my son. Like, we going. And they start the journey. And he goes. And he went knowing with every intention of doing what God said. How do we know that? Because when they got to the mountain, he told the servants who could possibly overtake him. He's like, y'all stay down here with the animals. Me and Isaac going up here for this sacrifice. He gets up there, he builds the altar, and then he lays his son out, and that knife was coming down. It was going to hurt him to kill his son. But what he had, because again, how to please God, he recognized who God was. He had submitted to God as Lord. He was surrendered to God's authority. And so this alignment of his will and operating in obedience, it wasn't rocket science for him. So he pleased God. And God was so pleased that God was like, nah, I was just kidding. I got a ram over there caught in the brush. Don't kill your son. But we never get to the ram in the bush because we're still back at the campsite arguing with God about the fact that he said sacrifice Isaac. And because I love Isaac and I've waited for him my whole, nope, obey immediately, obey even if it hurts, obey even if it at cost to yourself. At cost to yourself. My finances ain't working out because it hasn't cost, like the last thing God told. I'll give you a real-time personal example, y'all, and y'all can judge me. That's okay. God has asked me to share my life and to share my testimony and share how he comes for me. So I'm going to be 100% honest. There was a time that I stopped giving to the poor. There was a time that I stopped giving to the poor. I was that person. I would actually intentionally, and I am back to doing that in obedience, that I keep two $5 bills in my purse or a $10 bill folded up at all times in my wallet so that every time someone asks me for money, I don't have cash is no longer an option. But let me tell you, there was a time that I had stopped doing that and I would say I don't have cash. And God was like, but you have money. And I have said every time you do it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. So why don't you have cash when you could have cash? You just aren't intentional about doing it. And then God hit me with when you stop, when you realize that the people who are asking, they change. In where I live, in Maryland, it used to be that the homeless were Black. They look like me. It would be so-and-so coming up, sis, can I get a little change? I'm trying to get something to eat. They got their sign that said, please help. And they looked like me. They looked like my uncle, cousin, mother, friend, husband. It could have been me. And so, but honestly, honest to goodness, I realized that the people now who ask in the same places that I drive, they don't look like me anymore. They might have blonde hair and blue eyes. And I judge them based on, it's no longer a war on drugs. It's an opioid epidemic. And I'm not saying either way, I'm not going beyond that. But I'm telling you, because they changed, my behavior changed. And God was like, but when did they stop being my kids? I care just as much about them and whatever they are strung out on or whatever it is they're going to do with the money than the person who looks like you, who you felt better about giving it to. And so God checked me. He checked my heart. He checked my judgy intentions. He checked everything about me. And so now, again, I always have cash in my wallet because you ain't going to catch me off guard. There will always, says, here you go. And when I give that one out, I go back to the ATM and take more money out. And this is nothing to make myself sound better. I'm just obedient at cost to myself. And I can't tell you how many times, like, there have been things where the money was sketchy and I don't know how it works out. And the money lasted longer than I thought it would, or things worked out, or somebody didn't ask for so-and-so, or like, I'm not going to worry myself about these numbers. What I worry about myself is my obedience, even at cost to myself. So obey immediately, obey at cost to yourself, obey even if it hurts. I told y'all, we already talked about it. It was going to hurt Abraham to kill Isaac. Then I know I'm missing one. But the next one I'm going to talk about is obey until it's finished. Obey until it's finished, ladies and gentlemen, until it's finished, or until you get to the point where you can't go any further without God. That looks like, and we're going to switch stories, we're going to switch Bible characters, but we're going to look at Saul. And I'm pretty sure I talked to you about this 2 weeks ago, but we're going to rehash it in the context of this story, this conversation, so that you get the full picture. But here we have Saul, ladies and gentlemen, and God's instruction was clear. I want you to go and I want you to wipe out, I'm pretty sure it was the Amalekites. And this is 1 Samuel, I think around chapter 13. But the instruction was wipe out everybody, kill everything, man, woman, boy, girl, cows, chickens, pigeons, wipe them out. I have utterly destroyed. He goes, and what does he save? He saves the king, and he saves the animals, some of the choicest animals for sacrifice. So if we are picking, let's say Saul destroyed, he was 98% obedient. 98% obedience. Only 2%. And okay, only 2%. He was 98% obedient. You know what God said? The verse that we quote all the time, to obey is better than sacrifice. And I count your rebellion as witchcraft and something better than the fat of lambs. Like, God was angry. Saul lost the kingdom that day. He was 98% obedient, and God told him, you are rebellious. You out here, and God told you, and you tiptoe in, you tiptoe out, you Lena, I'm gonna do this. And as soon as it get whatever, or as soon as people start seeing what you're doing, or as soon as whatever, you forget what you were doing. I was being obedient to God. And then see the other previous points. Because if it at some point it costs you something, if at some point it hurts, if at some point it's painful, like none of that matters. Because I recognize who God is. I'm gonna surrender to his authority. I'm gonna, like, again, it doesn't matter. You know what matters? Your obedience matters. Now I'm gonna tell you my story, and I'm gonna get out of your way. So my story, and it's about this thing that I'm telling you about. God told me, literally, in a conversation. So let's back up just so you have context. Beginning of the year, I am one of those people who get words for the year. My word for this year was enlargement. Honest to goodness, I was intimidated by the word. Honest to goodness, I was like, enlargement, I don't know that I can handle anything more. So I was like, well, it's going to take discipline to manage the enlargement. So I was focused on developing my discipline. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do the third. That is what I did. And so I would talk about discipline all the time. Go back to my early videos. Y'all will hear me talk about discipline way more than I would enlargement. But God asked me to bring back this ministry that he had given me several years ago. And I was like, okay, God, I can do that. Y'all know that I brought back what I used to do, and I didn't enlarge it. I didn't I didn't even add a Zoom room. That would have been enlarging. I brought it back exactly as it is, and God was like, no. So he shut it down. And then God started dealing with me about my pride, which y'all know, because we got a whole 2 months, at least a full month, about pride and how God dragged me about pride. And so after all of that, he comes back, and in this conversation, God's like, you know what? Enlargement looks like a gathering. It looks like a conference. And I was like, ooh. But I heard God. And so later that night, I went and I was like, okay, if it's a conference, what is it supposed to look like? Y'all, I promise you, within 30 minutes to an hour, I had everything. I had a place. God told me where it was supposed to be. He told me who the speakers were supposed to be. He told me, how my sessions are supposed to be set up, how long it's supposed to be. Like, all the details I needed were given to me by God in a 30 to 45 minute probably download. I can show you. It's in my journal. This journal right here. That's why. And I wrote it all down, and I gave it to God. So the next day, I reached out to a friend of mine, and I was like, you've been to a bunch of conferences. Like, what do you need? And she was like, well, it's going to take about 5 months to plan it, y'all. I'm like, okay. So then I reach out to the place that God told me. Mind you, I ain't got nothing, but God told me to do this. I reach out and I pick a date 5 months in advance. I reach out to the place, and I'm like, hey, would you know that I was one weekend off? They had an available slot for 1 weekend from 5 months. And it was actually 4.5 months. And I'm telling you that literally since then, every step I have taken, there has been a moment where God invaded my moments. He would give people dreams about this thing. He has given people dreams. He gave me notes to presentations 5 years ago that other people wrote. And so I could give them back their notes that they had written 5 years ago and say, this is what God wants you to talk about in this. So when I come to you now and I tell you that I am putting on, I am organizing this global gathering, My Girlfriend's Kitchen, it's an exercise in obedience. But more than anything, I am doing this to please God. I recognize who he is. I have submitted to him as Lord. I surrender to his authority. And every step I take in and operate in obedience, he has shown me that this is in alignment with his will. I have done more for God in 2 weeks of obedience than I have probably done in the last 7 years combined. And fulfilling the full word because it's bigger than I thought. And I said this to my girlfriend yesterday, and we had a whole moment because I told her I was confused because I thought something of this magnitude, I thought it would be harder. And then I had to confess to my girlfriend, I didn't think about hard. My focus was obedience. So I just want to encourage somebody who's feeling like, oh, man, God, that's too big. Focus on your obedience. Focus on your obedience. God, you write down all that he told you to do. Did I do everything he told you to do? If what he told you to do is going to require processes underneath it, write down the processes. Keep your list. Y'all think I'm joking. I have checklists, multi-page checklists of things. Am I doing? And y'all see my check marks as I do them, like I'm checking them off as I go along. God, okay, I did this that God said. I did that God said. Because I'm just operating in obedience. And if you are operating in obedience, even if it's painful, even at cost to yourself, all the way through until it's finished. Once you started, immediately, if you are in obedience, then you are aligning yourself with his will, and you will see the result. You will please God, and then you can get your, this is my beloved son, or this is my beloved daughter, in whom I am well pleased. You'll get those moments. But greater than those, we will also get the, when life is over and he comes, you get the, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of thy Lord. Ty Tribb has said we're living our whole life to hear 2 words, well done. Well, to get those 2 words, you have to please him along the way. And I encourage you, if you like this content, again, if you like what I am sharing, what I am saying, you like this broadcast, there will be much more of this at my gathering. The gathering is happening December 8th through the 10th here in Central Maryland. In the coming weeks, I will reveal our location, but y'all just track with me. It is not too late to secure your spot. And here's why. While I am doing something that is bigger than I have ever done before, God was very specific about where it could happen. And so in that, I legitimately have a limited amount of spots. You go on the website, there are 3 tiers. The premium offer, I literally only have 30 slots. That's the max. Like there's no, I'm gonna find you extra. There are only 30 slots available. For customary, there are 70 slots available. And for virtual, there are 50 slots available. So Like I don't know if you're supposed to do this in advertising, if you're supposed to make people feel a certain way, but I am telling you guys the honest truth. If this is something you want to be a part of, take advantage of it while it is available. Because when it is done, when I say premium sold out, I mean it is sold out, it is gone. When I say no more virtual seats, all the virtual seats are gone. When I say customary is sold out, it is sold out, and you would have missed this move of God. But I am telling you, my girlfriend, the last thing I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to get out of your way. She asked me, Lenore, what do you want to see with this? What do you want to see? You know what I want to see? I want to see a move of God that I have never experienced before. I told her, like, I know God doesn't repeat miracles. So, like, ain't gonna be no pillar of clouds. They may not be no tongues of fire, but I want us to see angels. I want the Spirit of God to lay us out so thick that no one can speak. I want the tangible presence of God to invade that room and anoint us for real. I want to be undone in the presence of God. That is what I am pursuing with this gathering. And if you are interested in such an experience, again, I'm telling you, the website is up. It's www.mygirlfriendskitchen.com. I'm going to put it in the comments I'm going to put a banner up for everybody so that you can see. Right? I'm typing, and I guess I can't type and talk. This is it. mygirlfriendskitchen.com. Girlfriends with a Z. Y'all know about me and those Z's. It's always about the kingdom. Everything I do will always be about the kingdom, and that is my denote. What did God tell me his kingdom is? Zion. I'm always Zion focused. Everything I do will always be about legacy builders. Right next to it right here, that's about Zion. We're building the kingdom. In this case, I'm building my girlfriends, my sister friends, my everybody for the kingdom. If you are interested in being a part of this move of God, I am telling you, sign up. Don't waste time. There are payment plans. If you scroll down the page, you see I've set it up through PayPal. If you got PayPal and you got it, you can do your payment plans and you pay however you want. But what I am telling you is when those spots are sold out, they're sold out. So I promise you that at the end of this broadcast, I would share with you our thing. I am going to see if there is a winner, and I will contact the winner. But today, our speaker, the person who is talking about grief, is none other than Dr. Quantrilla Ard. She has agreed to speak to our conference, and our first session will be on grief. I invite you to follow her on all social media. She is the PhD Mama. That is her Instagram handle, the PhD Mama. She is also on all the socials. I will put all her information up there. But you are going to now see a new graphic that is going up as soon as I get off this live, where I will be sharing with you, that we have weeks to go. But I am telling you, time is of the essence. I talked about obey immediately. If you feel like God is telling you that you need to be here, obey immediately. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you were blessed by this series on how to please God. I look forward, ladies and gentlemen, to being with you next week, and I will be live way more. I have a special live coming up tomorrow with a sister friend of mine who wants to share her testimony, and that's what my platform is about. My platform is about sharing God, because the Bible says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. So join me tomorrow, where we will be able to go live. It's going to be at around 3:00 in the afternoon. So Eastern Standard Time, I think that's like 11 or noon. What's that? Pacific Standard Time, but or in all the time zones in between. But definitely join me tomorrow when I go live with my sister friend, and she will share an amazing testimony about how God is moving her forward. So I thank you for watching with me today. And as I always tell you, I pray that your the latter half of your day is greater than the beginning. Bye-bye.
What our trust and this faith journey has produced is peace and joy. And so, God, we enter your gates today with thanksgiving. We are thanking you that we are growing up in faith. We are thanking you that we are becoming and beholding and becoming changed for the time we have spent in your presence.